Good morning, my friends. Let's continue to talk about that Middle Eastern UFO and NASA's epic self-owning. All right. I was so excited. I prepared. I make a lot of coffee some mornings, and this morning these two were full. There were two completely filled cups of coffee, and yes, there is more in here than this. And I just pounded it. Okay, I'm excited. After I make these videos, I'm going to go for a jog, and I've got some training to do, but also I've got some research and blogging about the UFO UAP topic. So this epic NASA self-own on the Middle Eastern UFO, let's react to a little bit further. All right, let's talk about the verbiage. He said, we watch this thing travel, and you can see that it is traveling at not a hypersonic speed, a subsonic speed, but a substantial speed, a type of a speed you would see in a typical aircraft. You can see that it crosses what I would estimate to be several blocks, probably a couple miles worth of real estate. It crosses it in an absolute straight line, at a speed absolutely not consistent with a balloon. It is not floating. It is moving purposely with some type of propulsion, and it is about a 10-foot in diameter metallic sphere. Okay, and apparently NASA thinks that is not an anomaly. Meanwhile, while you're watching this, while the panel is watching this, he says, this is very typical. We see this all across the world. But apparently, there is verifiable evidence that metallic spheres are traveling all across the world purposefully, with no wings, with no rockets, with no jets, with no ailerons, with no tail fins, with no visible ports, no visible cameras, and no visible radar. And he said, this is typical. It is not anomalous. And then he says, at the time, this was 2021, okay? At the time, we had about 640 plus reports, but now they're up to 800. And he's showing a pie graph, and in the pie graph, it says that 47% of the sightings are these metallic orbs. Folks, NASA just proved that non-human anomalous technology exists in our skies all over the world, and during the time period that NASA looked at it, let's think about it. If it's 640 plus, and 47% is almost 50, so he's saying 320% would be a 50% of the sightings, but it's a little bit less than 50%. So let's just chop it down. Let's just make a rough estimate. We don't need to be very pedantic. Let's say 280. So in the time period that NASA looked, NASA just confessed that there are 280 sightings, tracked, verifiable sightings of metallic orbs in our skies, flying around in what they think is not an anomalous manner, because apparently globes of metal just fly. These are the people that we have entrusted with our millions, billions of dollars in our space program. These are the people that, if they actually believe this to be true, and they are not behind it, which I think so, I think we're looking at something as simple as incredible incompetence. How our space agency got this incompetent, man, could it be that once NASA understood that we have techno-signatures in our skies, and probably off planet, probably around the moon, once they realize that this solar system has another technological presence that is much more advanced than ours, there is a reason why we abandoned the moon project. There is a reason why manned missions are no longer a priority, and why we're sending probes. That's not bad. It's not bad. I would call it caution. All right? If I moved into a neighborhood, let's just say, right? If I moved into a neighborhood and I'm walking around and I have a property and the neighboring property, there is no fence between the neighboring property and my property. All right? And on this side, there's another property and there is no fence between my neighborhood and my property, and across the street is a similar situation, and behind me are other properties and there are no fences, and we share common land, forest. Okay? I would want to know where my property begins and theirs end. I would do a survey, which is what the space exploration program was doing. We were conducting a survey, and we were doing it mostly manually, and I think a lot of it is because we didn't have technology then like we do now. Our probes, our robots, our sensors were not as sophisticated as sending a person up there. All right? That may not be 100% true, but I just know that our technology is far better now. I've got better technology in a flip phone than NASA had back then in many ways. Now, what if I start walking down the street and I start seeing my neighbors, and I just notice that my neighbors are very unusual. They're all 8 feet tall. Okay? And they have a different morphology. What if they have like claws on their fingertips and they have fangs and they look very dangerous? And my neighbors are driving levitating jet cars, and my neighbors' houses do things I've never seen. In other words, once I discover that, I would be even more cautious. I would be careful about surveying. I wouldn't want to walk onto my neighbor's land because they're very different. They're not human. Okay? They could be monsters. They could just be another species that isn't necessarily malevolent but potentially very powerful because they're 8 feet tall, powerful. They have fangs and claws, and they have high technology. So if that's what NASA did, I understand. But we paid them, we bankrolled them, we gave NASA and the Air Force and our government and the Department of Defense all this money and all this leeway in the idea that they were our servants. They are our servants. They are our employees. We paid for them, we fed them, we clothed them, we sent their kids to college, we gave them scholarships, many of them. We funded DARPA, and we expect disclosure and we expect results. Okay? And if this information, the most critical information in the history of our species, has been kept from us for decades, we're owed an apology. Heads should roll in terms of firings and rehirings, and we need to start this all over. Because NASA basically said that during, right now it's up to 800. 800. Right? So NASA is saying that there are almost 400 flying metallic orbs across the globe without apparent means of propulsion. And they may be too incompetent to realize that flying metallic orbs are anomalous. I know this, and I am no NASA rocket scientist. What they're telling me is right now, I or you would make a better science representative and officer than these allegedly highly qualified, highly educated, highly trained scientists at NASA. Folks, this is not the end of this video series. This is not the end of me looking into the topic. This is important. A little bit of my background. When I was in the Marine Corps, I was in the Marine Corps Security Forces Battalion, MCSF BN Lant, NB Norva 3511. That was our address, Naval Base, Norfolk, Virginia, which is a naval air station. My unit, Fast Company, and I served in both the 2nd and 4th platoons there, was part of the Security Forces Battalion. The Security Forces Battalion is assigned to not just provide physical security around naval nuclear assets, and I think that's all I can tell you. I can't get into, until I look it up, what's classified, what's not. I will tell you that we dealt with nuclear assets, and we were a counter-terrorist security force. And what I can tell you is, aside from the fact that we provided physical security for those establishments, we were prepared to retake those facilities and those assets should they be compromised, right? And we were told, for example, what if a terrorist group got on board a naval nuclear asset, and they come in different categories, and they held somebody hostage? We were told, you have authorization to shoot that hostage. The nukes are more important than any individual life or any group of lives. And I'll never forget, I think he was a colonel at the time, and he talked about they were running a base operation, and no one told me this is classified, and so I'm assuming it's not, and the statute of limitations may be over. He said there was a lance corporal whose position was DM, designated marksman, which is kind of like an urban sniper. At the time we had scopes. Certain people got scope rifles, and he was told, well, what if the hostage is a pregnant woman? And he said, she goes down, I shoot her. It doesn't matter. The nukes and nuclear facilities and nuclear materials are all important. This was 1989 and throughout the early 90s when I was there. I served from 88 to 92. And this is not classified to my knowledge. That's how important this is. Okay? Now, these objects show up around nuclear facilities and nuclear assets. And I'm going to say, any time it shows up around an aircraft carrier task force, that aircraft carrier is nuclear powered. It is a nuclear asset. It may or may not contain nuclear weapons. It may or may not, but most likely does, have a nuclear submarine near it or other submarines, right? There are nuclear submarines that may be nuclear powered, but they may not have nuclear weapons, or they may be nuclear submarines that also have nuclear weapons. You follow me? And therefore, metallic orbs are constantly across, near, in the vicinity of, above, and around these nuclear assets, according to the data that NASA has publicly said in their Middle East video. And apparently, and there is zero mention of these artificial objects, these technosignatures, announcing their presence. I mean, if you're a civilian aircraft and you show up around a nuclear asset, you will be tracked, you will be contacted, you will be informed you are in violation of our airspace, you must turn around, or you will be shot down. Incidentally, let's talk about the failures of our Air Force. I mean, look at 9/11 when those jets could have been shot down and not one was shot down. Not a one. What is wrong with our air assets and our space assets and our, apparently the naval air assets are the ones that are doing the better job of tracking these things, engaging with these things, trying to establish perhaps a form of communication and releasing the information and confirming the information, right? NASA and the Air Force are not performing up to standard. They are not performing the job that they are paid billions of dollars to do. And the NASA Middle East video and the accompanying verbiage is a confirmation of that. Folks, please share the video with your associates and friends who are into UFOs, UAPs. I would like to see this argument, this analysis shared and expanded upon. We need to bring to the public's attention that NASA's own words and own video has revealed that there is an anomalous technosignature. Now, if there is a country that can do this on this planet, if it's not, I'm not saying it's aliens, but if there is another nation that has technology this advanced, that hundreds of these globes, spheres, are flying around the world, we need to know who they are. We need to talk to them. I mean, if they're that advanced in every area of their air assets and their energy production and their military assets, we need to make some kind of treaty with them yesterday. Maybe even submit, maybe even surrender. Okay? But Russia obviously doesn't have an air force worth a crap. And China is worse. Okay? China is even more backwards and behind. China doesn't have this capacity. Russia doesn't have this capacity. No known NATO member has this capacity. The Nordic countries are neutral. The Middle East has been bombed to crap. It's not Afghanistan. Some of those people are still fighting with Leon fields from World War II. Who is this? Who is this? We need to know. We need to talk about it. We need disclosure, and the public needs to use some of the arguments and some of the information that I gave in this video series and present this to our lawmakers, our politicians, and yes, even those people in the military. If that means a letter writing campaign, if that means making open appeals via video like I have, we need to do this, because this is a tangible potential threat. You'll have a wonderful day. I know I've got a lot to do.